attention please. Now I'd like to start the grand final of the Icho Cup 2012. Before I start the round, I'd like to introduce the judges of the grand final. The Mr. Motoki Kobayashi is from Seikei and is octo-finalist of Autumn THBT tournament 2011 and is quarter-finalist of Icho Cup 2012. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Naoki Iwasaki from Seikei. He is grand finalist of Debate no Susume 2012 and quarter-finalist of Gemini Cup 2012. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Shintaro Okawa from UT. He is semi-finalist and the third best speaker of second Icho Cup and semi-finalist of Spring JPDU tournament and the best speaker pre-Gemini Cup. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chiaki Furukawa. He is known as Chucky. He is from TMU and he is chief adjudicator of the Spring JPDU tournament 2012. And he is also breaking judge in BP Novice 2011. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tomoe Yonaga, which is known as YNG. And he is from Hichu. He is grand finalist of JPDU Spring Tournament 2012. And he is also breaking adjudicator of 3rd Malaysia Debate Open 2012. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Naoto Soda from BAR. He is grand finalist of Gemini Cup 2011 and semi-finalist of ICU tournament. And I'm supposedly famous for being a minority grand finalist in Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Takehiro Kamei. He is also famous as Kamei Dai Sensei. He is the chief of the ward and he is semi-finalist of the ICUT 2012 and is also adjudicator of the grand final of 12th Gemini Cup. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Stevenson from Hichu. He is octo-finalist of ICUT 2012, quarter-finalist of BP Novice 2011, semi-finalist of Icho Cup 2012, finalist of Japan BP 2011. And I'd like to introduce the chair judges of this grand final. His name is Mr. Fumiko Sano from University of Tokyo. He is 5th EF Best Speaker of World University Debating Championship 2012. And he's also champion at Summer ADI 2011 and champion at JPDU Free also 2012. And I'd like to start this round. Today, the motion for the grand final is this House believes that developing countries should nationalize natural resources. The government side Icho team from KDS and opposition side HNM from ICU. First of all, I would like to call up Prime Minister Yasuko Mori from KDS to deliver her constructive speech within 7 minutes. Here.
Madam Speaker, and hello, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that it is indispensable to ensure the people's welfare, to guarantee the welfare of people in developing countries. And as a consequence, we believe that developing countries should nationalize any kinds of national resources. To begin with, I'd like to characterize what the national resources is. National resources are something that is very easily exploited by other countries. Why? Because it's worth a lot. It's worth a lot of money. Other countries are stimulated to exploit these resources because they want these resources. And often, and in developing countries, often these the companies in developing countries don't have financial power. They don't have enough money to compete other companies in foreign countries. So it is very likely that these national resources in developing countries are exploited. Therefore, we believe that we need to intervene this. And then I'd like to move on to my argument. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the justification that the government has for this intervention. And secondly, I'm going to talk about what is the problem under the status quo. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about how this nationalization will help solving these problems. The first one is the justification. The ownership. Who has the ownership of these national resources? We believe that the national resources ownership should belong to the countries which owns that national resources. It is simple that these countries who has these national resources has the ownership to control these national resources. It is obvious that other countries cannot intervene in it. And also the people who live those countries should have the right to, or they are deserving the benefit from these national resources, the benefit from it. And also they have urgent need because they don't have money, they are not wealthy people. So they are therefore because they have need, and also the ownership belongs to the nation, and the right to benefit from those national resources are also belonging to those people in developing countries. We believe that there is enough justification for governments in developing countries to nationalize natural resources. So we believe that. And my second argument, what is the problem under the status quo? There are two big problems. The first one is the structural problem we have, and the second one is that private companies wouldn't care about the development of countries, those developing countries. The first one, the structural problem. We think that under the status quo, the private companies, like multinational corporations or something, come into those developing countries and start exploiting it. How? Firstly, they say they will give aid or money to those developing countries, or they say they will create employment for those developing countries. And this is similar to a carrot for them. Imagine that you have less unemployment and less employment rate, and you don't have enough money. Then these are very attractive for them. And because they don't have, as I said, they don't have money, or they have urgent need for money or employment, they will say that, okay, so you can you can own our national resources. Then they will give it, and then what happens? That exploitation will occur because there is an imbalance of information that richer company has bigger information, and poorer countries, which means developing countries, don't have lots of information, and they don't. And also they are in the weak condition. The richer countries are stronger usually. It is very likely that the exploitation will occur, or it is definitely it will occur. And then so because they are exploited and they continue to have less money, to have no money, they will continue being developing countries, and they cannot get out this structure. And so here is the structural problem that the people in developing countries, or the developing countries itself, is always controlled by those companies, those corporations, or those corporations in developed countries or developed countries itself. And we have to break this structure. The second problem is that private companies wouldn't care about development of countries because they have no incentives, because they don't have to. They don't have to care about the environment because it's not in their backyard. They see it just a product. They see it just something which makes money. They don't care about development of those countries. So we think that there's no incentive for them to care about developing countries' condition, and it's so bad for them. And my third point, nationalize. Well, how nationalizing will help this problem completely? Because government has incentive to do so. The first point, it will prevent multinational companies' exploitation by shutting out them from those countries. And secondly, they will distribute, the government, if nationalization has occurred, they will distribute proportionately to the people in developing countries. And thirdly, the distribution will become stable because there is no exploitation. The distribution will become stable. And why can we guarantee that these are likely to happen? Because the incentive for government is, at the end of the day, they are elected by people. They won't vote. So, because people in those countries are the certain persons who will vote for the government. So, government will willingly distribute those kind of resources, those kind of benefits to the people because they don't want to be blamed by. So, this is enough incentive for them. Therefore, for considering that the justification and the problem that we need to solve is very serious, and also it is very likely to we can achieve by taking this proposal. We are very proud to propose this plan.
Thank you for your remark, Yasukomori. Next, I would like to call a leader position, Hitomi Hakai from ICU, for her constructive speech within 7 minutes. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we believe that because under the status quo, the company from other country comes in and helping the developing country. That's the reason why the developing country is getting the benefit from it, and they are also getting technologies as well. But after the proposal, what's going to happen is that because the developing country, uniquely they have less capacity, they cannot be able to run this kind of natural resources, and this is going to be more harm than under the status quo. That's why we beg to oppose this motion. So I have 5 definitions. First is about justification. They say that since natural resources is under the country, they deserve the benefit for us. We totally agree on this. But what we are saying is that when the other country is running is helping out or learning the natural resources, that's the reason. That's the best efficient way to get natural resources. So this is the thing. And secondly, about the under the status quo, the company is exploiting the worker themselves. But we say this is totally not true. Why is that? We have 2 reasons why. First is about the worker is since they want to get natural resources, what they need is the workers, right? So there's no mean exploiting the worker and not be, giving them such a worse condition and saying that making the workers not be able to work. So this is never going to happen. And secondly, they say because the worker is so stupid, once they are being said that they can get the money, then they are going the money for themselves and work for that. But we say like, if the like salary is so low, then like compared to the other job which is provided from the country, then they are going to that work, so right? So that like since there is the like competition between the companies themselves, we say like the certain amount of salary is being like provided. And thirdly, they say the developing country does not totally care about the developed country, but we say firstly about like if they exploit so much on the developing country, then like then the other national country itself is going to be say this is immoral things, you should stop it, right? Because the case of China, like since they exported so much for the African or some other countries' natural resources, what we did is that like we say that this is unfair thing, we should stop it. So this is not gonna happen. And secondly, they say like even though they don't like let's care about them, but we are getting benefit from that by getting the like by getting a job and by getting the skills. And thirdly, they say that they somehow believe that after taking this proposal, then government could easily learn their like national resources. But we say national resources is something hard to like control. The reason why under the status quo that we are not nationalizing those kind of resources is because the government has no capacity to do that. So that like those reasons we found to oppose. Well, let me move on to my point. Firstly, about that how it is beneficial under the status quo and how harmful after taking this proposal in the two criteria. Firstly, about providing work. Under the status quo, well, because we are not nationalizing the national resources, we incentivize the other country to come to the developing country to do that. And why this is so good? Because this is going to provide the work for them. Like we are going to provide the since they need so many workers to dig the hole or work for the coal mine. The needs for the worker is going to be increased. And like those kind of people who live in the developed country is going to get the work. And secondly, about see some foreign countries people is going to come, right? So which means that like many they are going to use the money in the developing country, so that like it's gonna benefit for the shop they have in the developing country or so forth. And thirdly, about because there are many workers staying in this one place, which is like really nothing, then we should make the hotel, or we should make some place to stay on and so forth. So we say because the other country is coming and staying for this long distance, we are providing the good economy or so forth. And why we say like why this is better than like government doing it is because like the case of like working environment, this is much better compared to developing country and developed country, right? Because like developed country's company knows that like some of the people, some of the workers are from developed country as well, right? So that they want to make sure those kind of people is not going to get hurt, so they're going to provide a safer environment or so forth. But on the other hand, what's going to happen if the developed country government does that? Is that like because they have less capacity, because they have less money, they cannot provide the like better environment for themselves, right? So the more the accident is going to be occur, and the more citizens' life is going to be in danger. And yes, and let me move on to my after taking this proposal, how the job is going to be decreased, right? We have two reasons why. First is because since the government could not since the government could not control the national resources itself, then there would be less work for them, right? Because I explained it before, getting national resources needs so many skills, needs so many knowledge how to use it. Then we say even we nationalize them, it doesn't mean the government could automatically get all of a sudden get the national resources so effectively. And secondly, about what environment is going to be occur, as I said before, right? Because the government could not provide the capacity or so forth. And they might say they can hire the other countries' company or so forth. But we say this is more hard for the government themselves. Why is that? Because they have to pay certain amount of money for those kind of company. And since we are talking about developing country, they have not that much money to pay for that. So that's why we think this is not going to happen. And well, excuse my voice now. Under the status quo, the developing country is getting benefit from the developed country coming in, and this is incentivized, or this is helping the developing country to develop more, and that's why we beg to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, leader. Next, we'd like to call a member of government, Hana Oshima from KDS, for her constructive speech within 7 minutes. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I would like to begin by refuting to the points raised by the opposition, and then I would like to go over our points that my partner just explained on why we propose this motion today. Okay, so first of all, the previous speaker has said, she has repeatedly stated that the natural resources basically cannot be distributed efficiently by the government, right? That they don't have the ability to do this because they are developing countries, right? But we say that still does not justify the reasons why the complete ownership of the natural resource should be turned over to a private company. If natural resources, if they are going to be, if the need here is that the natural resources, I mean, we're talking about developing countries, right? So the people, they don't have access to they can't access their natural resources effectively because they aren't being distributed effectively. So what should be done? Then the government, they should build a partnership with these private companies. They don't have to give the complete ownership of the natural resources. It can be done with a partnership, right? So they still haven't told us why we have to give them the entire property, right, of natural resources. And I mean, come on, I'm sure you've all heard of the example. For example, they say there'll be a much more long-term effect to teach a starving person how to catch a fish than give them 10 kilograms of fish, right? Because why? Because in the long term, if this person knows how to catch the fish, then for their entire life, they don't have to rely on this person who will keep feeding them with this fish. They don't have to completely submit themselves to these people because they have the own ability to get the food that they need, right? So this is the same with natural resources, right? What we need to do today is to help people in the countries, in developing countries, the private companies, they need to help them do that, but they don't have to have complete ownership over that because in the long term, it will not be beneficial at all. And they said that there is no, they said that if we have private companies control the national resources, then the people in that country will be used and will be used as laborers, and they will not be exploited. But they haven't given us any reason on why they won't be exploited. I mean, because these are private companies and they have massive, they have so much, as my partner said, they have so much in the negotiations. They're in such a higher, better position because they have all the power. I mean, there is no transparency here. Even if the laborers are being exploited, the laborers, I mean, even if they tell their government, they're being exploited. The government, they don't have a say in this. They can't fight against the private companies because they have so much power over them, right? If they give them, if the full ownership of the natural resources is given to a private company, right? So that is all with my reputations, and I would like to incorporate other reputations as we go along. Okay, so to go over our points. First of all, we talked about how that we basically think that it will be much more efficient in the long term if the developed countries have ownership over their own national resources. Why is this? Okay, well, to distribute the national resources, the government, they need money, right? They need money, they need subsidies, they need some kind of taxes, right? So it is in their best incentive to use that tax money that they get from their people to distribute it from their people. And if, of course, they need aid from foreign governments or companies, right? But they're already getting that aid. So what they need is the knowledge of how to distribute it. It's not like they have to suddenly give all the ownership to some other company. No, they just need that knowledge, and they just need a little more push. And that doesn't mean giving the entire property, right, to a private company. And so they have every incentive, unlike corporations who only have their private profit, incentive of profit, it will be in their best interest to distribute it fairly to their people. And that is why we believe that the government of that country, not private companies, have the incentive, the best incentive to distribute these resources fairly to their people, right? I mean, for example, even if it's water, for example, if a company decides to privatize water in a certain developing country, then, they're not thinking about the long-term effect. Are we going to help this country develop? No, that's not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about how are we going to make the best profit, right? So they're going to sell this water to other countries for high prices, and if they're going to target that market inside the developing country, then they're only going to target the market where they can get the most profit out, right? So then they're going to target the people who can buy this sort of expensive water, and the people who can't buy it will never be able to access this water. And our second point is that this is a forced choice. It is a forced choice for developing countries to give their to give their natural resources to, it's sort of a structural forced choice to give it to them. Why? Because as my partner has said, in the negotiation, what happens in the negotiation? The companies, they say, we'll give you jobs, we'll give you financial aid, we'll give you infrastructure, so come on, give us your natural resources, right? That's what they say. And the developing countries, what else do they have? What is their ticket? Their only ticket is their natural resource. That's why. They only have it. It's a forced choice. You see the structure here? The private companies, they have everything. They have all the bait. And in the short term, if you compare the short term needs, of course they need everything that the private companies have just suggested to give them, right? So they give them their natural resources. And we cannot allow this kind of system because in the long term, it will not be constructive to help the developing countries become developed countries, right? So this structure, the structure of forced choice is the problem here we're talking about. And okay, next I would like to go on to our third point that my partner also very eloquently explained. The problem of how this is natural resources we're talking about here, okay? There's natural resources, there's limited resources, okay? So we can't have private companies from other countries just taking these, just having ownership over these resources. Why? Because they can continue to take these resources because there is a demand, right? So if there's a demand, they just continue to take the resources. Like, for example, like logging in Indonesia a while ago, right? Like, when they gave the logging rights to private companies, they just exploited all of it. Why did they exploit all of it? Because the logging is not conducted in their backyard, you see? So that's why. The idea of giving these limited resources, the uniqueness of these limited resources to private companies that only go for profit, not for the goods of the people, we strongly oppose to that idea, and therefore we propose this motion today. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call a member of position, Ms. Ogawa from ICU, for her constructive speech within 7 minutes. Here.
thank you, Mr. Speakers. In this debate, we have the same consensus from the both government side and opposition side that to protect citizens in developing countries, what should we do? And to help the developing countries themselves, to develop by themselves, what should we do? And as the opposition side, we strongly believe that since the government in the developing countries have no, unfortunately, they do not have a potential or ability to control the things or policies in their country. That is why we think that we cannot get the benefit and we cannot distribute the benefit to the citizens themselves. That is why we strongly oppose this motion. And today I'd like to talk about why the government cannot join the market after taking this proposal, since the private company could do so. But before that, let me rebuttal what the government side has said one by one. I have many responses to them, but because it was a little bit unclear, but I will point that out one by one. Firstly, about the justification. Since natural resources are existing in their country, that should be their benefits should be the benefits should go to the citizens themselves. We agree with this point. That is why we think that the private company from the foreign country should take a leadership to distribute the benefit to the citizens in that developing countries. Because from the government there is no explanation how the government can get the benefit from those kind of natural resources, and how can they distribute to the citizens themselves. And secondly, about the problem, they said that exploitation is a serious problem under the status quo. But we say that in the first place, there is no explanation from the government that how the people are having trouble under the status quo and how they are being exploited. No, thank you. And also, they said that as a problem, since the private company use the national resources freely, because they think that it's not for theirs and they can use freely, but we don't think so. In the first place, as my partner told you, in this international society, under the status quo, if some private companies do the seriously bad things to the developing country, the others can stop it, right? And also, in their model, they didn't explain how the government is going to use those kind of natural resources effectively. They might use those kind of natural resources as much as possible as well, right? And about the solution from the government side, they said that somehow naturally the problem would be solved if the government have a leadership. But there is no explanation from the government again, because they didn't explain how the government is going to join the market in the international society. And also about the partnership, they said that we can have a partnership between the company and the governments in the developing country. But firstly, in that case, we need huge budget to invite the private company, right? And in the case with the developing country, they do not have such a big money, right? And since we can get those kind of technology for nothing under the status quo, we think that's a better situation. Thank you. And also, even if we could have a big partnership between them, the company still can dominate this market as well, right? So we don't think the problem would be solved. And they say that somehow the government can distribute the resources or benefit fairly. But we think if it was Japan, it could be possible. But in the case of the developing country, since there is so many starving people and so many people who are losing their job and they are still not being protected by the government, we don't think that this kind of government can protect those citizens. And so let me move on to my point. I'd like to talk about why the government cannot join those kind of markets to make a profit and to distribute the benefit to the citizens. Under the status quo, since the multinational company taking the leadership in this kind of market, and for example, like share company, and in that situation, they are making the most amount of profit because they know the best price in that market and not to be high, because if the price was too high, no one will buy, and it was too low, if it's too low prices, they will not get any benefit, and that would be the exploit, right? And since they know how to negotiate with the other company and how to trade with another country or how to get benefit, they can get. That is why the multinational companies can set the best price for their product, and that is why they can get the profit, and that is why they can distribute the benefit to the citizens.
Yeah.
But after taking this proposal, what's going to happen is that the government tried to have a leadership, but they couldn't. Why? Because they do not, in the first place, they do not know the best price in the market. So they might set the price too high and no one will buy it, right? And if they set the price too low, that would be the exploit. And so in that case, government cannot make the profit for their natural resources. And secondly, they did not know how to negotiate or how to trade in that market, right? So if the private company which have a strong power come to them and say that, and we will not buy your products unless you have a cheaper price. But since they do not know how to negotiate with them, what is the best price on their product, they cannot refuse it because they think that they want to sell anyway to get in. At least we need the money and we have to buy it and we have to sell it. That is why they end up selling in a cheap price, and they cannot get the profit. That means they cannot distribute the benefit to the citizens as well. So that is why to protect the citizens in the developing country, we follow your course. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Next, I'd like to call on leader question again for the class speech within 4 minutes. Here.
Hi again. Well, the government side, all argument is starting on one assumption that after taking this proposal, government could control the national resources, and government could know the knowledge how to do the market and so forth. And we say, since they failed to explain how the government have the capacity to run those kind of resources, their all argument does not stand. That's why we take this debate. Well, let me explain. Let me sum up this debate. Well, the problem they gave us is this: other countries' company is exploiting the natural resources or the workers themselves. And the solution they gave us is nothing. And they actually gave us maybe after this proposal, they can the company and the the private company and developing country could make the partnership. But we say this is the exact same or mostly exact the same as under the status quo. There's no difference. And as my father already told you, there is still power imbalance, right? So there's no difference after taking this proposal. But on the other hand, we clearly told you how under the status quo is very good and how after taking this proposal is going to be harmful for the developing country and workers who live in there. So let me explain it about workers. We say under the status quo, this is the good. Many jobs is offering that, and secondly about working environment is better. Well, because I explained it in my point, because there are other company coming in, and because they need the worker to work in there, right? They are going to hire the citizens who live in the developing country, which means that those kind of poor people who have less access to the money is going to have the access to the money, and what they can do is that they can use those kind of money to maybe go to the university or to maybe go to the education or so forth. So this is good for them. And secondly about working environment is that as I say working environment is is good under the status quo, right? Because they're like the private company knows how to protect those kind of people in a difficult situation or so forth, and no reputation coming from the like government side. We say so that those kind of 2 points we are pretty sure we are right. And secondly, about like how the government could whether the government have the capacity to run the market itself or not. And there's like again no reputation coming from the government side that we could not like run the government could not run the market but on the other hand my partner told you like because there's no knowledge or because there's no like experience for the government itself, this is really hard for the government to run those to do the market properly, right? So like even though they have the natural resources, if they cannot if they cannot utilize them, then this is waste of like natural resources itself. So which is better after taking this proposal under the status quo? After taking this proposal, we show you how it's gonna work. Less work for the citizens themselves, and but even they have the bad working environment, and we say like less money is provided for those citizens, and the government may fail those kind of fail to learn the natural resources, but we say compared to the status quo, we say status quo is better, and that's why we take this basically.
Thank you for your remark. Next, I would like to call Mr. again to end this grand final within 4 minutes. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker again, Madam Speaker again. Before concluding our speech, our debate today, I'd like to make a refutation to what the previous speaker, actually the member of the opposition said. They said that government doesn't have ability to distribute equally, so we shouldn't give them the right to nationalize the natural resources. But as we said, government has enough incentive to distribute these resources equally because they want to make their own countries developed countries. And so the government has the incentive to distribute equally so that every single person in developing countries can access to those benefits. And so in order to become developed countries. And also they can reach information, they are not isolated or something. And even if they are lack of knowledge, they are lack of ability, other countries should give help, or as my partner explained, that it can achieve by having partnership, but we shouldn't achieve it by giving up our ownership. It is not something we should do. So, let me conclude our debates today. Let me remind you that why we need this policy. Because we want to ensure the welfare of people in those developing countries. Our main flashpoint was that whether or not multinational companies or private companies is harmful to developing countries. From the opposition's point of view, developing countries are getting benefit from private corporations, so there is no problems under the status quo. Therefore, we shouldn't nationalize natural resources. However, unfortunately, this is not happening, as my partner explained. Rather, status quo is so harmful, as we are continuously explaining. So we believe that there are lots of harms under the status quo, as we fully explained. And so we believe that we should take this plan to solve these problems. And there are no guarantees that people in developing countries will not be exploited, as I said. They didn't guarantee, the opposition side didn't guarantee, rather, and also, moreover, we believe the exploitation is very likely to occur because, firstly, they have urgent need for money or employment. so they easily yield to these sweet lie brought by multinational corporations, private corporations. And secondly, they don't have enough information, so they cannot know how unfair it is. So because of this imbalance of information, the exploitation is likely to happen. And thirdly, as my partner fully explained, this is a forced choice. These developing countries cannot say no, really, as my partner fully explained. So we think that it cannot be exploitation. For these reasons, we think that exploitation is very likely to occur. And there is no justification to give this entire property, the entire ownership, as my partner explained. We can have partnerships, but don't need to give up our ownership. Well, because we have the right to have this ownership. As our side said, there is two big problems under status quo. That they admitted that there is the power imbalance between developing countries and developed countries, and we have the structural problem that being these countries is continuing to be the developing countries, and also the private companies. They don't have the incentive, or they don't care about the development of these countries, and so we believe that these are very harmful. That they are all clear harm under the status quo. And we have to break these cycles, and we have to stop these private companies from exploiting. And we believe that this plan will prevent it. And also, they said that this plan is not effective, but not taking this proposal is rather effective. But even if it is effective, but can you allow them? Can you allow exploitation or developing countries those negative cycle, if that is effective? We don't think so. If you think it in the long run, as my partner explained, nationalization is rather effective. So for those reasons and for the purpose of protecting those people in those countries, we are very proud to propose this.